Okay, so I've noticed that some students have been a little bit confused by the backside of this sheet, and so I wanted to kind of go over the steps that you should be thinking about, the process you should be going through as you try to solve these problems. So I did this first one for you, but the important thing to note is kind of the order in which you should be doing these things. So the first thing we want to work on is the key. So a couple things to talk about there. We're going to do problem number 2 together. Now, for one, we always want to use the same letter. So I used B for both of my traits here. I used B because we generally use the first letter of the dominant trait. Okay. Now up here, if we read this question, it says that tan is the recessive color, and then it tells us that we also have a brown mouse. So we know that our two colors are brown and tan, and since we know tan is recessive, that means brown must be our dominant color. So that's why I did that. Now let's look at this one. This says we have two heterozygous white, and then we're also shown the color brown. So brown fur is recessive. Two heterozygous white, rabbits are crossed. So we have the colors white and brown, and we know brown is recessive. So I'll put brown down here for our recessive trait, and white must be our dominant trait. So again, using the first letter of our dominant trait, we'll use a big W to represent white and a little w to represent brown. Okay, great, so we did our key. The second thing that we need to do is figure out who our parents are. So up here it says two heterozygous white rabbits are crossed. Okay, I skipped what was in parentheses because we already kind of used that information. So two heterozygous white rabbits are crossed. Now remember, hetero means different, meaning we have two different sized letters in the genotype. So both of my parents are heterozygous. Both of my parents have a big W and a little w. Okay. What I've seen a lot of students doing is just putting one letter in this blank and putting another letter in this blank. But remember, again, looking at our example, each parent needs two alleles, right? So we need two letters on each blank. Since this is two heterozygous, it's a big W and a little w, big W, little w. Now we've got our two heterozygous parents. Great. Now remembering how to put that into a Punnett square, I usually take my first parent and put them along the top. So big W, little w, big W, little w. And then my other parent I'll put along the side, big W, little w. And then we fill in the square. And from what I've seen, I think you guys are doing a really good job there. But remember, the way we fill in the square is we look at what's above it and to the side of it, and we combine that. Okay, so I've got a big and a big above and next to it, so I've got a big, big there. Here I've got a little w above and a big W next to it, so I'm going to have one of each in this square. And remember, we just always want to put the big W first. So big W, little w there. Here we've got a big above and a little next to it, again combining those in this square with the big letter first. And then this one is a little and a little, so just two little W's there. Okay, there's your Punnett square. From what I've seen, you guys are pretty comfortable with that, but keep working on it. It's a skill to build. Okay, the last part where I'm seeing people get confused is this table. Now, I've given you a certain number of rows in this table for a very specific reason. There were only 2 rows, I could have drawn a line there, there were only 2 rows in this table because there were only 2 ways that the possible offspring could show up. Either they would be big B, like I have here, or they would be big B, little b, like I have here. Okay. Here, there are 3 ways that your offspring could show up. You have big W, big W, big W, little w in those 2 spots, and little w, little w. So that's what we need to fill in this table here. So our possible genotypes of our babies were big, 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 little, and little, little. Okay. Now, in this table, we're just going to follow across and kind of fill in the phenotype and percent of each one. So this big, big, first of all, what color is that? What's the phenotype that goes with that genotype? What's the physical description that goes with the genes? Okay, so since we've got big, big, coming back over here again, we've only got the white allele, so our color is going to be white. And what percentage of the time does that big W show up? It only shows up once in this in these 4 squares, so that is 25%. Okay. Looking at the next one, big W, little w. Again, because it does have at least one dominant allele, it's going to show that dominant trait of being white. So the phenotype for this one will be white as well. Now this one shows up twice in our 4-square sequence. So this one is going to show up 50% of the time. Okay? And then finally, little w, it only has the brown alleles, so it's going to be brown. And it only shows up once in the set of 4 squares, so that is 25%. Okay? So that's the process you should be going through as we do this. So again, first thing is to find your key. Remember, we're using the first letter of the dominant trait, and we're just using the big and little versions of that same letter. Okay? So once you find your key, your next step is to find the parents. Once you've done that, fill out your square. Once you've done that, fill out your table. Okay, so this is your first step, your second step, your third step, and your fourth step. There you go. I hope that helps.